if you're playing so hard to get, there's a point where I will just disengage because I will assume that you do not want to be courted, right? And that's the problem with playing these games. First of all, no one knows the rules, and everyone's kind of playing a different game.
You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is pretty simple: to support you in building rock-solid foundations, legendary integrity, and kick-ass relationships with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and a solid dose of some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast. I'm your host, Mike Campbell. Today, I'm very excited and privileged to bring you a wonderful guest by the name of Shaun Galanos, also known in social media as The Love Drive. The Love Drive. Why would someone be called that? Well, turns out there's a bit of a story there to that, which we get into in this episode. Spoiler alert. It starts with him driving a taxi and then recording his conversations with people about love and their love lives and all this kind of stuff. And then that kind of evolved into writing about it, talking about it, and then coaching around it. And Shaun, I love his take on things, how he explores the kinds of questions that he very frequently gets on social media, and the conversation that we get into today, where we venture into him a little bit, his love life, but more so like how he's got to where he's got to now and his approach to love and what the hell that is and the work that he does with people. We speak a little bit about dating. We speak a little bit about heartbreak, really dive into some pieces there on heartbreak, which is very, very fascinating and interesting and insightful and cool. I think there'll be plenty in this for you, but I don't want to let my words be the only introduction to Shaun. I want to read a little bit of Shaun's bio so you can get a little bit of the 4-on-1 from him. So let me read it literally straight from his website, and then we'll have all these links as always, including the work that he does and how you can access and find Shaun. Shaun Galanos is a love coach, the host of the Love Drive podcast, and an online course creator. He teaches intimacy and connection tools for better relationships and more love. He holds certifications in personal and professional coaching from all these places that I'll let you go and check out, because that's not really the meat and potatoes for our intro, is it? When he's not teaching courses on intimacy and communication or recording his podcast, he's continuing to learn about love, working on this relationship with his partner, and building community in Montreal, or where he's from, Phoenix, where he lives now, and of course, online. I think Shaun, I enjoy following him on Instagram. I absolutely loved this conversation with him. I feel like he's someone that I could definitely form a friendship with. Not that I'm trying to in some weird way, Shaun. I'm just saying I really dig this guy. I really enjoyed chatting with him. And if you follow me and you like me, I think you'll really enjoy this conversation with Shaun. So, as you guys know, now's the time to get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. My ask of you is remember to subscribe if you're not subscribed to this. Click download first, and please go and leave us a review, especially on Apple iTunes, because it does a wonderful job of getting this show in front of more eyes and ears and men that need this work, that can be supported by and benefit from this podcast. And now, let's get into the show. Shaun, welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast. It's great to have you here. I'm glad we could make this happen. We had a little bit of a stuttered start, but we're back, and very, very happy to connect and chat.
Yeah, super pumped to be here, Mike. Thank you.
So, Shaun, I have followed you for a while, and I really like what I see you put out on social media, and the situation like this, right? Some people who follow me and listen to this podcast might know you. Plenty might not, so I would love to introduce them to you. The question I'm going to ask is one that I like to ask, and please feel free to take this anywhere you want because it has scope, and that is this: who is Shaun Galanos?
Yeah, great question. Also, great pronunciation of my last name. Most people say Galanos or
Yeah.
So you got it right. Also, for your Australian listeners, my dad's actually from Australia.
Right.
I visited. I have an Australian passport. I haven't used it in about 2 decades, but
Right.
used to spend a lot of time in Perth growing up in like the Cottesloe,
Okay.
Fremantle area. So
Yeah, right.
just a funny aside. So who is Shaun? I guess he's the son of a Greek Australian man and a French Canadian woman.
You're right.
And I've spent a lot of time in Canada and in the United States. I've traveled extensively, and somewhere along the way, I became a love coach. I started driving a taxi in San Francisco in 2014, and I started recording my conversations with my passengers, and I put those videos on YouTube, and I called it the Love Drive. And so that's where the name The Love Drive came from. I now have a podcast, the Love Drive podcast, and I have an Instagram called The Love Drive. And over the years, I got certified as a coach and started doing courses, videos, and the podcast, and now coaching. So that's sort of been what I've been up to for the last 7 or so years. These days, I'm doing a lot more group coaching programs. And I'm probably on the verge of writing a book. I feel like that's the next thing. And started doing this work. Yeah, started doing this work because I create the kind of content that I wish I had growing up, or the stuff that I need reminding of today.
Yeah, I resonate with that one. I always think, right, I'm talking to Mike of 10, 15 years ago, and also like sometimes this morning.
Oh yeah. I mean, I need a lot of reminders of like how to act and how to behave.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I am fascinated with the taxi piece. How did that come about? What was the whole idea there from the get-go? I'm going to do that and record the conversations, or those kind of naturally came to be?
Yeah, no, it's I was looking for a new job. I had left tech a long time ago. I didn't want to go back to corporate America. Excuse me. And I started driving a taxi because it was good money. Living in San Francisco, it's like a good city to drive a cab. It also got really boring really quickly. And a friend said, "Oh, you're always talking about love. So why don't you record your conversations?" And this friend will take credit for every good idea that I've ever had. And I give it to her. She really has helped me a lot. And so I put cameras and lights and microphones in the cab, and I would, people would hop in and I'd say, "Hey, welcome to the Love Drive." And I'd ask them questions, pretty basic questions like, how do you feel about having sex when you're on your period? Or how do you feel about prostitution? Or why do men love anal? Like pretty low hanging fruit stuff at the time this was almost 10 years ago. So I was much younger. And people liked it. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people were not into it. They just wanted to like a ride to their meeting. They did not want to.
So it was kind of like a no, I'm not, don't record me type of thing.
Yeah. And then the people that were into it were usually like people in the service industry or other creatives, and the people that weren't into it were like people working in tech or like professionals that absolutely did not want to be on YouTube.
Too serious, and life is serious, and I don't have time for this, and it's irresponsible.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, So that, and I did that for about a year, and it's interesting because that's a really good exercise in learning rejection resilience, because 8 out of 10 people said no. Right. So you just have to put the clipboard away and then drop them off. And I think rejection resilience is something that we probably could use a little bit more of. Right? I think people generally in love or in life are just terrified of hearing a no, right? Because they take that no so personally, and they take it as a no to you as a person rather than the thing that you're asking for.
Yeah, I love that distinction. Can you explore that a little bit more? Like, was that, as you said, that was an exercise in rejection resilience for you? Where were you perhaps on, we'll make it up now in the moment, the spectrum of ability to handle rejection prior to that?
I think I was always pretty good. I've put myself out there for a lot of stuff, knowing that generally, when someone says no to me, I choose to take it personally or not. I also have what most people would consider above average confidence. I feel, positively about myself most of the time. When I don't, I accept it. I accept the fact that I'm feeling down or I'm feeling negatively about myself. I try not to engage in a lot of negative self-talk. So for me, rejection isn't that debilitating, or the idea of rejection.
Yeah.
But I
so
still
again, to your point, it can be more, you can more easily take it about the thing you're asking, not about you as a person.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. I know it's not about me, even if it's a really important relationship that ends. And I've had several of those happen. And not to say that I don't grieve or am heartbroken, I am, but I don't take those things personally, because I know that what they're saying no to is not really me, but it's our connection or the thing that I'm asking for. Right. So the people in the back of the cab weren't saying you're stupid. They were just saying your idea is stupid. And I go, okay, that's fair,
Yeah, or potentially any other number of things, like I've got so many other things going on in my life right now that might have nothing to do with even the thing I'm asking.
And even if it is personal, right? Let's talk about heartbreak for a sec. Even if someone breaks up with you because they just stop loving you, but that is quite personal, right? But you choose how to take it. Yeah, it hurts. I mean, it's devastating. You choose how personally you take it. Right.
So can you talk us into that a little bit, right? Because speaking from experience and, from a lot of the men that I work with, there also can be challenge, I think, in exploring the nuance, which I suggest is probably coming in this answer, right? Like, so then does that just mean I just kind of like brush it to the side and not have any care around it?
Yeah, you need, self-awareness, I think is sort of one of the keys to living a healthier life and to progress in a positive way, right? What have I done, or how have I acted to contribute to the ending of this relationship? Right. So sometimes it can be really easy to be like, I'm an asshole. I'll never gonna find love. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable, and sort of fall down into this spiral of rejection and shame, which is often really unhelpful. Right. It's not a great motivator for change.
Yeah, and as I said, from what I hear in that collection there is like that is all about me as a person, and that's a heavy weight to come out from under.
Yeah, shame does not, guilt to a certain degree, but shame is really deeply rooted and not a positive motivator. I think what's a little bit better is to have some insight about how you've acted and how they've acted and how you've co-created this dynamic that no longer works. And sometimes someone can be a little bit more responsible than the other, but at the end of the day, it's two people coming together to build a relationship, and sometimes that ends, right? So you choose, to my point, how far you want to take responsibility for the ending of that relationship.
Yeah, and so then when you deal with people who are experiencing the end of a relationship, potential heartbreak, obviously those can come about through many different scenarios, and they are really struggling in that place of attaching a lot of meaning, potentially taking it very personally, making it about them, right? And all those things that you voiced. How do you start to approach that with them?
I mean, at first, you have to sit with the discomfort and the desperation and the despair and the heartbreak that this breakup or whatever it is, it could be, getting fired from your dream job, right?
Wait, so you can't just bypass all of that?
You can, and a lot of people do. And actually I think men are more likely to bypass through whatever, performance optimizing, jumping to the next thing, buying stuff, retail therapy. And I'm guilty, totally guilty of a lot of this stuff at times. I do try to slow down though. I do try to sit with the pain, the discomfort, the loneliness, whatever, often it's just a lot of disappointment, right? The disappointment that this didn't turn out the way I thought it would, right? Getting fired from a dream job, it's like, hopefully you were maybe hoping or expecting to get promoted at some point, right? Or to continue being fulfilled in this role.
Yeah. There's
and
a path
the
there.
opposite the opposite happened, right? You were let go and told that you are not a good fit for this role anymore. And so that's going to be a big hit, a big hit to the ego. So I think step one is just sit with the disappointment that your life or whatever this situation is has not turned out the way you expected it to or wanted it to. And that's a hard, tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Facing, our expectations and where we end up on the other side of them. I like to say in a reasonably brash way that expectations tend to fuck our lives. Of course, it's a simple soundbite and there's a lot of nuance there, but that can be the thing right now. Of course, the answer is not to have zero expectations and not strive in the job or whatever, right? So there's a lot of nuance in that. But I think, what I'm hearing in that as well is, as you said, slowing down, sitting in the space and feeling what's there and perhaps getting the messages and maybe following the inquiry to learn, as you said, like, okay, what has been my part in this and so on, so we can actually start to move through, not just sit in it or quickly try and bypass it.
Yeah, and there's a limit to the sitting, also if you're experiencing an immense amount of discomfort, reaching out for your favorite comfort food or activity is totally fine. We are not meant to sit with a lot of discomfort at once. I mean, I know you could like sort of, maybe someone could argue that you could Wim Hof your way through it or something, and just grit your teeth and bear it. And I am more of the slower, gentler approach, slowly over time.
We seem to have more avenues for bypassing these days. Some of them look healthier than others, perhaps.
I think a good blend of sitting with your disappointment or your pain or your anger, your sadness, and finding healthy-ish ways to soothe. I would say drugs and alcohol is not a good way to soothe, even though they will numb and they will comfort temporarily. I mean, alcohol is a depressant, so it's going to actually get worse. You seem to be like a performance optimizer, health kind of guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would, I suppose, in simple answer, I would count performance. I like to count performance as a high value, but really for me, what that kind of comes down to is things like health, right? Like my ability to show up as best I can in all areas of my life.
Yeah,
but not someone obsessed with performance, perhaps in a different way.
Right. Like a Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I'm not David Goggins.
The reason I ask is there's are you familiar with the Huberman Lab podcast? And he did the episode on alcohol. Did you hear that one?
Yes. Yeah, caught a piece of it.
Yeah. So anybody listening, if you want Andrew Huberman, if you want to continue to enjoy drinking, do not listen to this episode, because of what you will learn is how bad and toxic it is for the body, the brain, and the soul. It's really, really bad. So if you're hurting, alcohol, drugs are probably not the answer. But grabbing a movie with your buddies, getting a workout in, binging on a TV show, scrolling, a doom scroll, but as long as it's not your ex's Instagram or your ex-employer's Instagram or the people that used to work there. These are like, fairly benign ways to escape your pain. That can be used in conjunction with sitting with your pain.
Yeah, not a new city to move to and set up camp, but to visit whilst we're also moving through. Okay, so let's, because I want to dive into so many things, including you. But you mentioned the X piece there. So I'd love to explore that, because, I mean, I think it's probably a safe assumption that everyone's got X's somewhere in some form. But often it's one of those things that's a real challenge for people to let go of. We can look back and, what if, and maybe I've screwed that up, and there's something still there, and there's still, it can come out in many forms and many different words, but there's still this kind of attachment to the X, and maybe even like a glorifying of the X and the relationship there together. do you have personal experience of this? But like, how do we actually start to, let go and move on to the potential that could be in front of us when we seem to be very stuck there?
Yeah, probably one of the most frequently asked questions that I get on my Instagram is, how do I move on?
Yeah.
How do I move on? People are, within, with reason and understandably, they get attached to their relationships. And if you're the one who got broken up with, it can be extremely hard to let go of, right? Because for a lot of people, they didn't see it coming, and so it's sort of you get the blind side, which I think is kind of unfortunate in relationships. I wish that people would talk more about what's going on with them throughout the process, even if it's, hey, I'm having doubts about our relationship. Right, because what happens then is you let someone into your internal world, and they can also share, oh, that's interesting that you say that, I also feel the same way, or wow, I'm so shocked, I thought we were doing so well, or you told me that you were in love with me last night and now you're saying that you have doubts, right? So these disclosures are ripe with opportunities to deepen the understanding and the connection in that relationship. So one of the, just sort of a side note, is talk about the relationship that you're in while you're in it. What happens is, I think people make up their mind. Yeah. The more you talk, the more they talk. That's something that my therapist told me a long time ago. People usually make up their mind and then they let the other know. I've made up a mind that I'm breaking up with you. And so that's just particularly rough for someone to handle.
That.
Yeah, so have I. And I remember one woman brought me to an Indian restaurant because she didn't want me to create a scene. And I did everything I could to convince her to come back to my house, and to like prolong our connection, our conversation.
Had you set up a potential reality that you were a scene maker?
I had been known to maybe have to throw tantrums.
Okay.
Quite possibly. And I've thrown them in public, so I don't know what she was thinking, because I'm not above throwing a tantrum in an Indian restaurant,
So you clung on, you tried.
Yeah, I tried and I clung it. And actually what happened in that relationship, which is very apropos to this conversation, is that we had agreed to do a period of 6 months of no contact, and then for us to explore getting back together. And I had heard explored getting back together, and what she had said was just get together for like a coffee. So I got stuck for 6 months, homie. I was on standby mode for 6 months, waiting for us to get back together.
Gonna explore.
It's going to be great. And it didn't happen. We got together and she had like moved on completely. And what I learned in that moment was that when there's a breakup, just assume it's over. Right? It doesn't mean that you might not see each other again, or there isn't a possibility of rekindling. But the best thing you can do is assume that it's over, right? Which will allow you to start the healing process right away, rather than to keep hoping that maybe there's a chance, right? And maybe there's a chance really does prevent the healing to start right away. Because
there could be a chance, but probably not in that space. But if I can, move forward and learn what's there for me and all these kind of things, some people might find each other again at a point down the line, but probably not if I'm still stuck on what it was back then.
Yeah, and I also don't want to give too many people hope. If you think about it, there's a million songs about breakups, right? And there's one song about getting back together, just reunited by Peaches and Herb, right? So, and that's like in the 70s. So, it's not a high probability move, but it does happen. And the problem is that everyone has an anecdote. Everyone's got an uncle. They divorced and they found each other again 10 years later, and we love those stories, but I think they're few and far between. So
I suppose the more we are attached to something and glorifying it in our past, the less open we are to what is available potentially for us in the future. And I suppose, as you said, one of the more common questions you get. How do I let go? What about those people who don't want to let go?
Well, there is a period where you don't want to let go. There's a period where a lot of people just don't want to let go. And to your point about glorifying the past, it's really easy to romanticize the past. So I moved to a mountain town in Arizona from Montreal, and I just got back from visiting Montreal, and it's really easy to romanticize Montreal in September. Right. It is just, the weather's perfect. People are going out. Everything's happening. But it's a lot harder to do it in the middle of February. Right. In the down part of that relationship. Right. So we tend to stick to the highlights, the better parts, the things that really light us up. And we forget about the chaos and the pain. The best parallel that I can make is that I got sober 15 years ago because I used to drink and do a lot of drugs. And one of the sayings that they have in 12-step recovery is, before you relapse, play the tape forward. Right? The first couple drinks are great. But is it great when you're 10, 12 drinks down and you're puking in a bathroom at a fucking shitty bar in San Francisco? And you miss going to work and you get fired and you have is that great? Right? Because we have to play the tape forward. And so I think it can be really helpful at the end of a relationship to go, okay, yeah, there were some great things about this relationship. And we want to remember what those great things are so that we can find them again in the next relationship. But we also want to remember, what were the challenges? What were the things that were really missing? Like the fact that she was unable to commit, or the fact that she was whatever, or the fact that he was too busy, didn't have enough time for me, right? What are the things that were really fundamentally flawed in the relationships? We need to remember that as well so that we can minimize that moving forward.
Yeah, and I suppose that's an invitation to be honest with ourselves so we can see what's there and, as you say, learn from it and move forward. And when you're saying before, like a lot of people, some people experience where they're blindsided, or they are the person, I've made up my mind and now I'm telling you. And the invitation to talk more frequently about the relationship. And I love this idea of, like, I suppose just a relationship check-in or something, like, where are we at, how are we going, like, cards on the table, let's be honest, this is how we grow. But I'm also aware of a scenario of sorts that I've kind of heard, maybe come across many times. I work with men, I hear from many women. Surprise, surprise. Every guy I know who works with me hears from many women. And there's a scenario that I've heard of and come across many times where he feels blindsided. She feels like she has been having the conversations, dropping the hints, or very strong, much stronger than hints. And so there's all of a sudden this other difference where it's like, I was blindsided. It's like, I've been trying to communicate this for a long time. Is that something that you also come across?
I don't know. I don't actually have any personal experience, or even, I get a lot of my insights from, comments and DMs in my Instagram and sort of patterns that I see. And am I surprised that women are saying I'm telling him and men are saying I never heard it? No, not really. Could they be better at being more direct? Probably. Could men be better at listening more? Probably. Right. So, and this isn't just gendered stuff also. I mean, you could have men that are incredibly emotionally available and direct and forward, and you could have a woman who's anxious and a little shut down. Right. So these dynamics, we find them in all sorts of different gender blends and dyads and triads. But yeah, I think I'm not surprised. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And I suppose, I'm saying that as this is a common thing that I have seen, but like literally right now in a coaching container of mine, I have two guys in those differing roles. The one who's, being called forward more, and the one who's doing the emotional work to call his partner forward. Yeah, and I suppose again that the challenge there is talking about, I like to talk about communicating about our communication. Like, let's actually communicate, bring some parameters and guidelines into place so that when we are having tough conversations, we actually have tools and things to call on, so we can navigate those things with a little more ease, especially if we maybe get emotionally flooded and we go into our fight or flight and potentially don't respond with the most grace, compassion.
I mean, that's tough. It's really tough to get anything productive done in fight or flight. Right. I think the suggestion that I've heard and that I employ, although I haven't really had to employ it in a long time, is that when you're in that zone, you need a break. You need to time out. Right. There's very little productive interaction that's going to happen. So, and even taking a time out can really trigger the other person as well. Right. So it has to be done well. It has to be like, look, babe, I can't do this right now. I need a break. I'm feeling flooded. I want to come back. Can I get like 20 minutes to walk around the block, get some energy out? Maybe I'll make a phone call and I promise I'll be back. Right. So I think the issue is that a lot of people don't know when they're coming back. Right. They storm out and it's like, are they coming back at all? So I think if it's said with loving kindness and, you know, they might even say, no, we got to finish this right now. And you're like, babe, it's not going to happen. I'll see you in 20 minutes. And you walk out the door. Right. And you come back in 20 minutes, right, to show that you're a trustworthy person.
Exactly. Yeah. Got to follow through on that piece, but honor your own boundaries and needs in that moment. Yeah. So where I want to go now, this might have changed. I'm not completely up to date, but I saw you share a piece recently-ish where you spoke about your situation as a love coach who was single. Maybe you had a question about it, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. So I'll wait for you to ask the question.
Are you single? I'll ask that question first.
I don't talk about my relationship publicly anymore.
Yeah, cool.
The question that came by was, I love it how people get so upset about not knowing your relationship status, right? And the reason I do that is to protect myself.
Yeah.
And also my loved ones.
Yeah.
Right. So as a love coach, the people that I date or am in a relationship with don't necessarily consent to having a lot of curious followers know about their life. Right.
Yeah.
And so with social media being the way it is, I think it's just like prudent of me to not talk about that stuff. And also, I don't think it's actually that necessary. Right. If the advice works, if it resonates with you, that's all you really need to know. And you can glean from my content that I have skin in the game, right? That I have been, you know, I've been broken up with, I've had long-term relationships, I've been successful and unsuccessful in love. And I think that's more important than anything. And people do love to project. They do love to project. I think the other thing that people want to know if I'm single because they would love to date me. I think there's a small, maybe medium size contingency of people that are like, if he's single, I'm going to shoot my shot. And then there's the others that want to know, am I successful in relationships? Right. And to that I say, like, you know, if you go to a Michelin star restaurant and the food is amazing, do you care if he has a degree in culinary arts, you know, or do you care if he's able to cook himself a really good meal at home? Because the deal with those chefs, I think, is that they'll spend all their time cooking, and then when they come home, they're eating mac and cheese, right? Because they're so tired. So that may or may not be the case with me.
Yeah, right. What's the saying? Never trust a skinny cook.
A skinny chef. Yeah.
I love that though, because it is drawing a line in the sand almost, and you know what's happening over here is actually irrelevant. There's definitely depths and learnings and experiments and all that stuff and lived experience, but what I have is for you or it's not. And yeah, as you say, it feels like there's the desire for credibility. Can I trust this guy? And not necessarily trusting themselves that the piece of information perhaps that he shared actually lands with me.
Yeah. And also, just to expand a little bit, one thing that I don't want is a lot of unsolicited advice or sympathy. And I think that if I said, oh, our relationship ended, I would get thousands of messages from people expressing their sympathy and the fact that they are there for me. And while I appreciate that and I find that really loving, I don't actually need my followers to be there for me. right? I have a therapist, I have friends, I have family, I have people that I have my own protocols. I don't need strangers outpouring of love, even though it is touching, right? And then I also find that these like public breakups are super cringy. Just so cringy. And I can't. That's not me,
Well, it's a different level of content, let's say, right? There's always content, but as you say, it's lovely, or it could be lovely to get all the support and etc. But it also could be completely overwhelming, I imagine.
Yeah,
I have a good friend who experienced something very similar, very large following, and at a point in time she had a breakup and shared with me just the sheer amount of projection was probably the most common thing, and that was coming from people in terms of, if it didn't work out for you, how's it ever going to work out for me? All these kind of things.
Yeah, that's like the last thing I would want to deal with. And I'll be honest with you, there is a piece of protecting my pride, right? That if I was in a relationship and then I broke up, then I would be the single love coach. And that, I would start thinking that I wasn't able to find love, or that I wouldn't be a successful, person to find love. So there is a bit of that. I am still a prideful person. We have pride and ego, and it serves a purpose. So there's a little bit of that too.
Cool. Thank you for the honesty, and totally understandable. So then, one of the things we've spoken about here a little bit, love, breakups, and kind of that side of relationships. What about the other side, the beginnings, the area of dating? Is that something that you, not personally, but maybe, but we can obviously take into account the last conversation. When it comes to, I know one of the things that you do is you get questions from people, and I love, the videos that you do in response, because, there's some beautiful advice in there, and sometimes it's just like straight to the point, hilarious. But dating is obviously one of the other big areas when it comes to relationships. That is a whole new world compared to, I'm 40, so God, I'm not that old, right? But apps, I've been married, I've been with my wife maybe 10 years, I wasn't on apps. Like, it is a different world now. And there's both, people just generally in their lives at a point where they're dating, and maybe they've been in that space for a long time, in and out, perhaps not having long, sustained relationships. And then there's these days, and I see a lot of men in this space, they've come out of a big, long relationship, perhaps a divorce, and now they're in the world of dating again. It's like, what's going on here? What would be some of the more common challenges, I suppose, that you see from people in the world of dating?
Yeah, so I can speak to this personally and professionally. I have been, had relationships on and off my whole life, and I have been on dating apps for, the better part, when I'm not in a relationship, of 15 years, right? So 10 to 15 years from the very beginning of OkCupid and all that stuff. And I also have a lot of clients who are recently divorced and who are jumping into the dating game, never having used apps before, or not having known how the landscape has shifted. So to me, apps are just a tool to meet people, right? That's it. And it's a good tool. It does put you in touch with people who are, for the most part, looking to go on dates. I was told at some point that a third of people online will never meet up. Men, women, non-gender binary, whatever. They're there for entertainment, validation. They're too timid, too scared. They're not there yet. So just know that like a third of the people are just never going to meet up, right? Dating apps
That's
also really good. That's a lot. It's 1 in 3, right? Dating apps are a great tool for rejection resilience as well. They really are. And for expectation management. One of the things that I caution people is that try not to get too excited about someone that you've never met, right? Because all is their profile and then the chat game. And it could be great. It could be, I can't count how many times I've had amazing text chemistry, and when we met in person, it was flat. Just nothing, and And I would have known that if I hadn't met them online. I would have known that if I had met them at a party or through a friend or just at a restaurant or whatever, it would have been an immediate no for me. So manage your expectations.
What does that date look like?
The date, it's pretty awkward.
Yeah.
You're definitely,
and I guess there could be, variance in the length of that text conversation leading into that, which might change it a little bit. But as you say, if it's coming in hot and then the date, how does that go?
It's definitely disappointing, and it takes more effort than you thought that it was going to.
Yeah.
Right. What might feel effortless over text might feel very effortful in person. People have, weird little social anxieties. And I also like to say that, like, if you actually enjoyed yourself, but you're not sure, just go on a second date. Right. Because people are often pretty nervous on the first date. So there has to be a little bit of room for that, like, first date nerves.
Yeah.
But there also, there are situations where there is just no chemistry. There's no banter. It's real awkward, and it's like pulling teeth. And
so have you had the reverse then? More like pulling teeth, in the app via text, and then you meet up and it's like, oh wow, this was unexpected.
Yeah, and that's why I don't make any judgment calls before I meet somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And so the only goal of the first date is to see if you like them enough to see them again. Right. So the goal is not to impress them. The goal is not to get them to like you. It's for you to figure out if you like them enough. Right. Sure. Show up, ask questions, but if everybody was just more concerned about, do I like them enough, then we wouldn't have to worry about sort of showing up as the person that we think they're going to like.
Yeah.
Which is moving you away from who you really are. Right. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of wrestling with self in that one, because of course we can't know what we think they want us to be.
Well, why bother?
Yeah.
Just show up, be kind, try to have fun. And, if you're funny, be funny. But I think less time spent on thinking what they want, and more time spent on, this is who I am, and hopefully it jives with you. And if it doesn't, like, cool, that's totally fine. Right. Most dates are not going to end in a match. So set those expectations really low. I'm going out to meet like a friend that maybe there's a romantic potential for down the line.
And so you've kind of spoken this word a couple of times in the chemistry. Can you talk us through that a little bit? Because to me, there's obviously, there's the potential for a lot in that, but to the point of expectation management, right? As you said, it could be one of those things that we place so much on it. Like, there needs to be this fire and chemistry in the first date or the second date, or even just in the text conversation.
Yeah, chemistry is tough. I struggle with how to describe this because it's we could all come up with a different definition. It's also called the spark, right? There has to be some element of mystery and also some element of familiarity, right? I think a lot of chemistry is probably a red flag, right? If the chemistry is just off the charts, but compatibility is low, that's something to watch out for. I think a lot of the stuff comes back to attachment theory and how, us trying to recreate a dynamic that we experienced growing up, and to try to solve some of those unhealthy, the unhealed parts of those relationships. We try to rework them in future relationships. And
so when you talk about chemistry, high chemistry, that could be a red flag. What kind of thing could that look like?
High chemistry is something like, I feel like I've known them forever. I feel like we're meant to be together. I feel like I finally found my person on the first date. To me, that's a red flag. What I would much rather you experience on the first date is, wow, that was really fun. They asked me some questions. I asked them some questions. I find them very attractive or cute. We have some shared values. We might disagree on one or two things. I'm definitely excited to see them again. I think that's what I would most rather people experience. And then there's the whole devoid of chemistry. Like, man, it feels like we'd be freaking great friends. Okay, well, maybe they're just friends. There's a new friend. Like, go play badminton with them, right? And not necessarily date them. So you have to have a little bit of that je ne sais quoi, a little bit of that intrigue, but it can't be like alarm bells are going off.
Yeah. And would you say that it's common that two people can come in with that kind of chemistry, or it can be kind of one-sided where there's a bit of a love bomb kind of situation?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, there can be, you've probably experienced this in relationships where someone is madly in love with one person and the other one's not.
Yeah.
Right? And so how can two people have such different experiences of the same thing? And it does happen.
Yeah.
It really does happen. And that's why a good relationship check-in every now and then, like, how are we feeling about each other? How are we doing? Do you love me more than I love you? Like, how do you dream about me? Like, these kinds of things are really nice to have on a regular basis.
And so to that dynamic, and perhaps more of the people that you have worked with, on what side, because obviously that's not every dynamic, but it's one, on what side of that relationship would you tend to be seeing the people? The person who's madly in love, or the person who isn't really feeling it, or is it just a mix?
I don't know. This doesn't actually come up that often in the people that I work with. I work with a lot of single women.
Yeah.
Right. Who are trying to figure out what are they doing wrong. And that's more of the work that I'm doing. But the love bomb thing is pretty wild. I've never experienced it. Have you ever experienced being love bombed?
I would say yes, a version of it where not necessarily a love bomb, but more to that the previous dynamic of like, she was way more into it than me, and there was a mutual friend who is now in the other room with my child, also known as my wife. And I, spoke to my wife, friend at the time, and was kind of playing this out a bit. And she had said to me, like, basically, like, get over yourself. You're reading too much into it, kind of thing. And yeah, the next 6 to 12 months showed I was pretty right. That person went on and was in a very, very serious relationship very quickly. But it wasn't a love bombing. I think that would be unfair, but it was definitely a skewed in that this person's way into this, and that's not really where I am. And am I missing something? That kind of thing.
Well, if you're an everyday legend, you just got to get used to it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was basically the conversation from my friend at the time. Yeah, get over yourself. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm reading this accurately, but it was also challenging because then I was like, well, am I not? Am I missing something? Am I, there was a lot of, I suppose, second guessing. What I can now reflect on was, essentially my intuition telling me like, oh no, this is happening. But I suppose the beautiful thing was I was actually able to go and talk to friends and get some different perspectives because I couldn't see what I couldn't see.
Yeah, and I think some imbalance about, one person feeling more stronger than the other is pretty normal. Some level. And I think that also that will teeter-totter throughout the relationship.
Yeah.
There'll be times when one partner is feeling more in love than the other, and that's fine. We don't need equal balance in that department. But if there's a big difference, then we're probably going to have an issue.
Yeah. And so that might then point to maybe in a relationship or maybe in the earlier stages in the dating period of like kind of one person more being the pursuer, almost chasing the other person. Is that something that you see? And it could be broadly, but I mean, you have shared there that you tend to work more with single women. What's the experience that you see of that?
Yeah, I think people on all sides do appreciate a little bit of being desired. Right. I think what I see is the women do not, for the most part, want to pursue a man. Right? They would prefer to be pursued. Then there's a little bit of an issue that from what I can tell, men aren't pursuing women as much off dating apps, right? So
Right.
dating apps have kind of like, it has made us a little lazy. I think I
Yeah.
would say people are more reliant on them because it's safer. And I understand there's a societal risk to approaching people in public, to pursuing people in public, or in person. You don't know if they're available, right? They could be in a relationship. You don't know what gender they're attracted to. You don't know what their experience with your gender has been, right? So there could be some past trauma there that make going up to someone and talking to them pretty risky, right? So, but generally speaking, men, women are going to want to be pursued or not going to want to chase. I mean, that's what I hear this over and over and over again. Do not make me chase a man. I would like to be courted. I would like to be desired. And so that puts a lot of onus of responsibility on men to do that, right?
Who, to your earlier point at the start there, as a human, have a need and desire to be desired
also, yeah, you can't make the dude chase you without giving him some love as well, right? And that's a good point, right? If you're playing so hard to get, there's a point where I will just disengage because I will assume that you do not want to be courted, right? And that's the problem with playing these games. First of all, no one knows the rules, and everyone's kind of playing a different game. So, yeah, you have to let the man know that you're appreciating the advances, that you are there, but also, try not to be all in right off the bat, because regardless of who you are or what your gender is, all in right off the bat is really dangerous. You don't actually know what you're jumping into. Right.
Yeah.
And so I prefer that relationships progress slowly over time, and that actually has a built-in sort of mystery mechanism, right? If you don't give too much of yourself too soon, then you do create some space for desire to sort of the fire of desire to sort of stoke, rather than to smother it, or to have like a wildfire situation, which is also dangerous,
Yeah, and I suppose there's I would think maybe an important distinction there of not giving all of you is different to like hiding and pretending, and as you said earlier, like trying to be someone you think that they want to be. It's being yourself, but not just giving everything. Like, this is all of me, because that's fairly overwhelming.
Yeah, and it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for the most part, they haven't consented to receiving all of you all at once, right? And so I really do think, because I also work with women more, I do think that they need to open up slowly over time to make sure that it's a safe container, that's a safe dynamic, safe person to open up to. And also, I think that just generally speaking, regardless of gender, the inner circle is small by design, right? The inner circle of people that know who you truly are is small by design, because it's risky, and because not everybody is going to be able to handle that with the care that it requires.
Yeah.
Is your baby on the other side of the screen?
Pardon?
Is your baby on the other side of the screen?
No.
Oh, okay.
What is that?
I just thought you were looking at what could be a baby. Just I saw like loving eyes, but I guess maybe you were looking at something else in a loving way.
It was you, Shaun.
Okay.
My thinking is off to the side. So perhaps it's just, I'm very curious, Shaun, and perhaps that's it. When I start to get curious, there's a similar look.
Everybody, Mike's got very loving eyes. That's all I have to say.
Oh, I appreciate you.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No. Where I think I was going with those eyes is I think there's a question in here, so I'm going to stumble my way through it. I'll ask for some grace. You see, one of the more common things that you hear from women is, where am I going wrong? So like I have like so much curiosity and compassion in there, and I know that most of the men listening to my shit are men. Most of the people listening are men. So what do you see as, quote, where women are going wrong, and perhaps where on the other side, certainly for heteronormative situations, are things that men are. It's not that women are doing something wrong. Maybe it's something men aren't wise to or aren't showing up in, or is there a gap there that we can perhaps bridge?
I love that question. I don't think it needed any grace. It was very direct and well thought out. I think where women might be going wrong, some of them, of course, is not speaking up about what they're wanting, what they're missing, what's not working. So I think there's a lot of hoping that if I just wait long enough, I will get what I want. I think the fear there is that if they speak up, they will be perceived as needy or clingy or desperate, and that will turn their partner off or the person that they're dating. And so rather than to do that, they just suffer silently. I think that's a product of not having been celebrated when they've asked for what they want. That's a product of them being told that they are needy, clingy, and desperate when they do speak up for what they want. So I think that's one of the things that I often coach a lot of people in, is just like, say the thing that you want. And if they think you're needy, clingy, or desperate, that is not your person. Right. On men's side, would really love to see men open up more. I would really love to see men celebrate their partners for asking for what they want. I would really love for men to not call people needy, clingy, or desperate because they have needs that are being unmet, and that they are now just finding the courage to speak up about those needs. Right. So, women do want a vulnerable man. They don't want, there's a lot of strength in vulnerability. Right. And I think more women will see it as a strength. There are some women that are like, please don't cry. I will not know how to deal with it. I will find you weak and I will lose all libido for you. Right. And if you're with one of those women, I'm sorry. I really am, because that is unfortunate, and there are probably really tough men that are perfect for her. But I would much rather I just want people to be more open about their emotional experience and what's going on for them, and for that to be welcomed and witnessed and held with tender love and care, and to understand that just because you are soft and you cry does not mean you are weak.
Absolutely. And even to the point, right, there's potentially some really tough men out there. Maybe we're not even doing tough at a service there. Perhaps there's some really emotionally closed off men out there who are perfect for those women.
Yeah. Find yourself a shutdown dude. If you don't ever want to see your man cry, find yourself a shutdown dude, because humans need to cry. I mean, I was talking to my therapist about this today. There's nothing more pure than touching sadness. Right. Sadness is one of those like bottom emotions. There's nothing underneath sadness. Oftentimes anger is sort of a surface level emotion because there's something underneath there, usually disappointment or sadness or feelings of unworthiness. But sadness is pure, and so we all have it. We all do need to be in contact with it now and then. Some people more than others, but it's a very powerful teacher that we all sort of need to have access to.
Yeah, and I suppose back to where we kind of started a lot of this around heartbreak, or perhaps a rejection of sorts. Doesn't have to be a long-term relationship. Often there's that piece, grief and other things, but that kind of, as you said, very baseline bottom emotion, sadness, sitting at the top of it. And we can use distractions or clinging to the good parts. Maybe there is resentment and anger. I heard someone say it, I cannot quote where it comes from, anger is sad's bodyguard. And anger and other things, other bodyguards who sadness and other things, but in a very simple soundbite, it works, right? And I think there's so much to be gained even at the very least as a perspective of like, if this is the depth, then it's what gives more perspective and relativity to the good stuff, right?
Anger is sadness's bodyguard.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I cannot claim that.
Doesn't matter. It's still really good. I'm glad I heard it.
Right. Shaun, I'm looking at the time here.
Mike.
It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. And learning off air that you were stalking me in the gym sometime in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, looking at this guy and I was like, "Who's this dude? He seems cool." You had a bald head at the time, and you were.
I mean, it's still bald back here. Like, trust me.
Yeah, no, I have that same problem, man. I'm 40, and I'm like, well, that's just what happens, and I'm not willing to take. You've got drugs for it. You've got the topical stuff, and you got the pill stuff. If I'm not mistaken, finasteride is not good for men to take. A lot of nasty side effects around libido, and I forget what they block. There's some sort of testosterone blocker.
Yeah, it is testosterone related in some capacity. I forget.
Yeah, so no good. The minoxidil, I'm not a doctor, so minoxidil or whatever, the Rogaine is topical, and that one doesn't mess with your testosterone. So if you're worried, if you're listening to this and you got a little nail pattern baldness or a little lightening of the crown, as I do, that might be something to look after.
Yeah, well, you've had your dream shattered that both Shaun and I are succumbing to Mother Nature's desire for us not to have hair on the top of our heads somewhere.
Well, I feel like we'll just meet up in Turkey and get a hair transplant in the next year or so.
Shaun, thank you so much. Can you please share with us, we'll put all the things in the show notes and so on, but what are you creating? Is there a way that people can get in touch with you and explore some of your work?
Yeah, I think just the Love Drive podcast is the easiest way. And then also my Instagram at the Love Drive. I don't have anything currently right now. I am creating a group coaching program that's probably going to start mid-January. And I'm very excited about. I think it might be the only thing I create in 2023. Other than like maybe a book or something. But
no, I heard the book thing.
I'm telling on myself. I'm telling on myself basically.
Yeah,
absolutely. Keep me accountable.
It's twice now, so that's real.
I know. So that's it. Just check out the podcast if you want conversations about love, relationships, sex, and dating, and the Instagram for all the funny Q&As. And it's been an honor.
Yeah, go and ask questions or go and witness Shaun's answering of questions.
Well, I got to tell you, the men that are listening, my audience is 87% women. So if you want to know how women think, just read the comments. You will get so much gold, right? I mean, they are literally telling you exactly what they want, exactly what they need. So if you want to be a good partner, or if you want to find love, you want to date women, probably a good idea to peruse the Love Drive.
I love it. What a way to end. Shaun, thank you so much for coming on the show. You bloody legend.
Yeah, my pleasure. You're a legend as well.
You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. If this podcast has benefited you, if you enjoyed this, then my invitation is to share this with a man that you think will also benefit from this and enjoy this. Remember, please, wherever you find your podcast, to like us, subscribe to us, click download first, leave us a review. All those things both make sure you get all the updates when they come in, and it supports us in getting this podcast in front of more everyday men that could use it. Until next time, I've been Mike Campbell. Remember to build that legendary integrity, and remember, everyday men, we thrive when we are championed, when we are supported, when we are appreciated and recognized for who we choose to be in the world. Here is my invitation to both show up and be that everyday legend, and to continue to champion the everyday men in your life.